I just watched the Tyson Fury open workout ahead of the Dillian Whyte fight on Saturday, and as you can see here, he boxed the majority of this pad session as a southpaw. Although he can switch hit, and I remember back in the days he fought as a southpaw for the entire fight against Martin Rogan. Since that time, other than maybe against Derek Chisora where he did it for extended periods in the rematch, he hasn't really committed to a southpaw stance in any fight that I can remember. He's flirted with it for brief periods in fights, but he's never stuck to it. And the question is, why? Is it because he isn't as confident in the southpaw stance as he is in an orthodox stance? I mean, that would make sense. Or is it because he just hasn't felt the need to box as a southpaw, and from a strategic point of view, he feels it's better against most opponents to fight orthodox? If he comes up against the guy who he thinks it will be better to box southpaw against, will he do so exclusively? Now, the reason I say this is because Dillian Whyte, in my estimation, might be that guy who it's best to box southpaw against. Perhaps not exclusively for the entire fight, but for extended periods. And the reason I say this is because Dillian Whyte doesn't have the greatest right hand. I'm not saying he can't punch hard with it, but I'm saying when it comes to accuracy at long range, Dillian Whyte doesn't really have that with his right. With southpaws, it's generally a case of trying to time them with a straight right hand down the pipe. Occasionally you get fighters who are able to land left hooks against southpaws, but this is usually contingent on southpaws squaring up a bit. If Tyson Fury boxes side on as a southpaw, I'm not sure how Dillian Whyte would cope with it if Tyson Fury's actually keeping it long. If he comes in close against Dillian Whyte and starts squaring up, as Tyson Fury does sometimes do when he fights up close, he will square up at times. If he does that with Dillian Whyte, then that's obviously going to take away the advantage of being a southpaw, which is that the lead hand, your right jab, is clashing with the orthodox's left jab. So a southpaw can usually take an orthodox fighter's jab away, and they become heavily reliant on that straight right hand, which, as I say, Dillian Whyte doesn't really have a straight right hand that's reliable from distance, particularly not against a taller man who, if he decides to box, can be very difficult at the best of times to catch clean. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that Tyson Fury is boxing southpaw in this pad session here at the open workout. If he's done a whole camp as a southpaw, then maybe he will come out and box that way against Dillian Whyte. Other people are speculating that this could just be mind games from Team Fury. We know he likes to do that, mess with Dillian Whyte's head right up until the day of the fight and have him second guess and have him thinking, well, is Fury going to box orthodox or southpaw? A bit confused about what he should do, how he should approach the first round. Maybe it's that. Or maybe, as I say, Tyson Fury genuinely intends to box out of this southpaw stance. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. Now, the second thing is Tyson Fury's condition. Now, Tyson Fury obviously has never been a body beautiful. He's always been a guy who doesn't have genetics that are conducive to being absolutely ripped like an Anthony Joshua or a Deontay Wilder. The same goes for Dillian Whyte, for that matter. Early on in his career, when he was a much younger man, at one stage when he was using an over-the-counter supplement, which he eventually got banned for because that supplement got banned, I think about 2 or 3 weeks before Dillian Whyte got banned for using it. It was very, very early on in his career, before he fought AJ. He had a 2-year ban from that. And Dillian Whyte back then, when he was using that training supplement, didn't get anywhere close to being as chiseled as AJ, but he had nearly a six-pack, and he was certainly a lot more chiseled than now. The Dillian Whyte of today, of course, well, we have to see him on the scales because he's been looking trim in interviews, but until you see him without the shirt, then you never know exactly what he's going to look like. But again, Dillian Whyte doesn't have the greatest genetics as far as looking aesthetically in shape. But we know that he's got a good engine, as does Tyson Fury. So with Tyson Fury here, people are speculating what weight he is. Is he somewhere around the 270 mark, over 270? like it was for his past 2 fights? Or will we see him down in the 260s? Well, he's certainly moving a lot more here in this training footage. And would he be able to move like this if he was over 270? Because you've got all this fat jiggling around his waist. He's still got this rubber ring, this spare tire here. A lot of people are saying that some of it is going to be loose skin. And of course it is, because when you've lost the amount of weight that Tyson Fury has lost, a huge amount, 100 pounds, whatever it was, there's going to be excess skin for sure. But at the same time, there's still a lot of fat there. And again, for him to lose that weight, it might take too much out of him in terms of the type of training he would have to do to get it off. And this is something that John Fury was against. This is one of the reasons, at least according to John Fury, that he kind of Ben Davison kind of fell out of John Fury's favor, because Ben Davison, in John Fury's opinion, was trying to get Tyson Fury to a weight which was far below what he can make comfortably, what he can make and still retain strength. And I think he was 250 something for his last fight with Ben Davison, and that was against Otto Wallin. So we'll see what happens here against Dillian Whyte if he is still strong at whatever weight he is. Let's say he's in the 260s, low 270s. I'm not saying that that's what he is. I'm just saying hypothetically, if you have any idea, if you think you can guesstimate what Tyson Fury actually weighs based upon this training footage, please leave a comment below and let us know. But maybe I'll do a separate video about this, but Dillian Whyte was talking about his physical strength. And I know he's in love with breaking his personal bests and all this kind of stuff in the gym. And he actually said that he believes he is one of the strongest heavyweights in history. Now, personally, I find that hard to believe. Dillian Whyte is strong for sure. And I've no doubt he's got stronger over the years. But one of the strongest heavyweights in history? I don't see it. Against Anthony Joshua, he was clearly the weaker man. And you can say that Dillian Whyte's strength has improved a lot since then, but I'm sure AJ's strength has improved a lot since then too. Against Derek Chisora both times, Derek Chisora was pushing him back, bullying him and manhandling him. It wasn't the other way around. I mean, look at when Carlos Takam fought Derek Chisora. Chisora couldn't come forward. He was on the back foot the whole night. He was getting bullied around, which just shows you how strong Carlos Takam is. So, yeah, although Dillian Whyte is definitely strong, I don't buy this idea that he's one of the strongest heavyweights of all time. If you are talking about the strongest heavyweights ever, I would say Lennox Lewis has definitely got to be up there. He had tremendous physical strength. This is something that many of his opponents talked about. Shannon Briggs, go look up the interviews that Shannon Briggs has done where he talks about Lennox Lewis, and he says the main thing that impressed him about Lewis wasn't the punching power or the skills or anything like that, because he'd been in there with guys who hit hard before, been in there with skillful fighters before, faster fighters than Lennox Lewis. He said the one thing that stood out to him about Lewis was he was unbelievably strong physically. He could not believe how strong this guy was. And Russ Purity, one of Lennox Lewis's sparring partners, was a very big guy. He said something similar, that Lewis was incredibly strong. And I think he said he's the strongest person that he'd ever been in the ring with at the time. And many, many other fighters have said the same thing. So Lennox Lewis will be up there in terms of, and Manny Stewart said this, by the way. Manny Stewart said that, in his view, the naturally strongest heavyweights ever were Lennox Lewis, George Foreman, and Sonny Liston. And if you watch those guys fight, you could see why Manny Stewart would say that. And of course, he was talking, I guess, back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s maybe, when he was training Vladimir Klitschko, I think, when he said this. So those are the three naturally strongest heavyweights ever. Not necessarily the hardest punchers, although George Foreman's definitely up there, Sonny Liston's up there, Lewis is up there. There may be guys above them. It's all arguable and debatable. We're just talking about physical strength, because there are some guys who are very physically strong, but they don't necessarily have great punching power, because with punching power, it comes down to more than just physical strength. You see it? So, yeah, I don't see Dillian Whyte up there in the same bracket as the Lennox Lewis's, the George Foremans, the Sonny Listons. I mean, just look how strong George Foreman was. Even as an old man in his 40s, there was nobody pushing George Foreman back. I mean, the guy was incredibly strong. So, yeah, I don't see that with Whyte. He is strong for sure, but one of the strongest in history? I don't think so. I don't think he's even the strongest now. Or is he even top 3 strongest now heavyweights in today's era? I would say Jarrell Miller's stronger. Anthony Joshua's stronger. It remains to be seen if Tyson Fury's stronger. I guess we'll find out on Saturday. Dillian Whyte seems to think that Tyson Fury isn't a particularly strong heavyweight. Perhaps he got that from when they sparred back in the days, but that was a very long time ago. I'm sure Tyson Fury has gained more man strength at this point, because back then I think he was in his early 20s. Now he's in his early 30s. So I think he'll be a lot physically more imposing than he was back when he sparred Dillian Whyte. And again, I'm sure Dillian Whyte has increased his strength also, but it will be potentially significant if Dillian Whyte has a decided strength advantage. Because in the clinches, when Tyson Fury is trying to wrap Dillian Whyte up and lean on him and all this kind of thing, if Dillian Whyte is significantly stronger than Fury is, then maybe Fury won't be able to do that stuff. Maybe it will take that out of Fury's game plan, or minimize the amount of clinching that Tyson Fury can do if Dillian Whyte is too strong and too much of a handful for him up close. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. And that's one of the things, actually, which doesn't always, how can I describe it? It isn't always apparent to people watching a fight that somebody is really physically strong. Because sometimes you can just feel it without getting into a big wrestling match. A guy hits you with a jab, and just the way he moves your head to the side with an open palm of his glove, you're like, wow, this guy's really strong. And a lot of people watching might miss things like that. And if you go and look at Dillian Whyte, for example, when he fought Robert Helenius, somebody who he did appear to be physically stronger than, I'm sure Robert Helenius would tell you that Dillian Whyte was really strong in that fight. And that in the first round, when they were jockeying for position with their jabs, Dillian Whyte was up on his toes. And I'll speak about this in the part 2, by the way, of my Keys to Victory video, because some people got it twisted and they thought that I meant Dillian Whyte should box Tyson Fury long. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that Dillian Whyte should jab his way in, basically. He shouldn't just rush in and abandon the jab. He doesn't have the technique or the style for that. If he's going to get close to Tyson Fury, he's got to jab his way in a very similar way to how he did against Robert Helenius. On the outside of range, moving his head, wait for the opportunity, bang, hit Tyson Fury with a solid jab just like he did Helenius. Then you can come in after that, once you've rocked him back on his heels with a jab, and throw some power shots off the back of it. Yeah, but to just rush in there and forget about jabbing on the outside, I think that would be a mistake. The only caveat I'll add to that is if Tyson Fury boxes southpaw, because if Tyson Fury boxes southpaw, as I say, that's going to cancel out Dillian Whyte's jab potentially, and therefore he'll be left with no other option than to just rush forward if Tyson Fury's boxing as a southpaw side on from the outside. If Tyson Fury's southpaw on the inside, doesn't really matter. Dillian Whyte's not going to have to go looking for him if Tyson Fury's coming at him from a southpaw stance and they're trading away up close. It's not going to matter. But if Tyson Fury's side on in a southpaw stance at long range, yeah, Dillian Whyte's jab will probably be nullified and therefore he'll have to go swinging in. But if Tyson Fury is orthodox, then like I say, I think he should approach it in a similar fashion to the way he boxed against Helenius in the early rounds, working his way in with the jab. Yeah, head movement, edge of long range, bang, time in the jab. Once you've rocked him back on his heels, then you can go in and start doing some damage with the big shots. So yeah, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to discuss, but the talking will be over on Saturday and we'll find out what's what, who's the harder puncher, who's going to box. Well, I say harder puncher. Who's the stronger fighter rather than a harder puncher? Who's going to box in which way, in which stance, what's going to work and what's not going to work, so on and so forth. So let me know what you guys think about everything I've talked about in this video. What did you make of the open workout, Tyson Fury's weight, boxing out the southpaw stance, all that good stuff? Let me know.